Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Mark Steiner. It's great to have you all with us. For 87 years in the heart of the South, the Highlander Center has been training and organizing in the civil rights, labor, and justice struggles of this country. It was a center of CI organizing with sharecroppers in the 1930s, a center of training civil rights workers in the 60s for SNCC, and organizing climate change activists in this century. People like Septima Clark, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and many others have been part of Highlander. Over the decades, state and federal authorities have tried to close the center. Now the attack seems to have escalated. A few weeks ago, on March the 29th, arsonists burned down Highlander's main house and left spray-painted symbols of the Fascist Romanian Iron Guard, a symbol used by many white nationalists and supremacist groups in this country. Is this just an isolated incident, an attack like that, or are we witnessing an escalation of violence against movements and activists? The Nation featured an article on the arson attack by Robin D.G. Kelly, who wrote Hammer and Hoe, Alabama Communists During the Great Depression, and Makani Themba, chief strategist at the Higher Ground Change Strategies and author of Fair Game, a strategy guide for racial justice communications in the Obama era. And we're joined now by Makani Themba. And Makani, welcome. Good to have you with us here on The Real News.
Thank you, Mark. It's always good to be here at The Real News.
So just for our viewers who don't really know the Highlander Center, talk about why this is so significant and why the two of you wrote this piece, this attack on the Highlander Center.
Well, Highlander, first of all, Highlander, like you said, 87-year-old institution, but it's not just about its history, as you talked about, its storied history in civil rights, a storied history in trade unionism in the South, its work in Appalachia, but it's really also about its contemporary impact. Highlander has been at the center of so many important movements. Media justice movements actually was birthed at Highlander, first Media Justice Summit, language justice work, immigrant rights organizations, as you said, climate justice. Highlander is just a safe space and a hub for movements here in the U.S., especially in the South, but also internationally. And so it's one of the few spaces that we on the left and as progressives hold and have in terms of the land, the buildings, and the property. And one of the things I just want to say it's important to clarify is that our administrative building is what was burned. But there's still a lot of buildings, properties, archives, things that are really important and main for Highlander that are still standing.
A lot was lost in this fire, and I wonder what you think this means in a larger sense. I mean, people can look at this and go, "Oh, this is an isolated incident. It just a bunch of crazy right-wingers and racists attacked this Highlander Center." But this could be something much more significant, given the power of that center is, and what this might portend about what we're about to have to face in this country.
Well, you know, as someone who lives in Mississippi and lives in the South, I want to be clear that yes, it's true that these attacks are ramping up, but it's not an isolated incident. But I think it's, and one thing I also want to be clear is that there is an investigation underway around the arson. So even though, yes, the symbol is spray painted, you know, it seems from the early indications that it was arson. That investigation is still ongoing. So I want to be clear that we don't have definitive answers at this point. But this is what many of us think. So this is not a official Highlander position. I want to make that clear.
Right.
That this arson is still under investigation. Having said that there hasn't really been that much of a let up, right, in terms of attacks. And Highlander, unfortunately, you know, and its staff, it's really an act of courage for folks to do this work. That it's an institution that has been targeted over the years. So I think that's important to say. And also acknowledge that there is an increase in how the right wing, particularly folks who identify as white supremacists, are operating here in the U.S. and globally, and that we need to be thinking about this. We should have been thinking about this. Security is going to be increasingly important for our movements. You know, you probably know about the attempted attack even on St. Patrick's Cathedral that was thwarted yesterday. So it's not even just about left institutions that are under attack, but there is a step up around how these militant right-wing cells are operating to make a name, to strike fear and terror in folks who are doing even what one might call progressive to liberal work, and that we really need to pay attention to these things, and that the attack on Highlander definitely is not isolated. There are other institutions that have been under attack, mosques, temples. There's just a wave, and these folks who are operating in a way where they are hoping to strike fear in us, to keep us from doing our work, to try to establish this sort of white patriarchal hierarchy that, and there's many of us who are in their sights. So it's not just about Highlander or even left institutions. There's many of us at risk.
So I wonder, one of the things I think about when I read your article and saw that this happened, that if we, when I look at American history, when I think of 1877 and what led up to 1877 and the end of Reconstruction and the violence that took place then, the violence that took place against the Black community for those 90 years after that, in a very direct way. Obviously, it hasn't stopped completely. But when you look at that, and you also look at the history of our world and how violence plays into to so much of struggles for justice in this world, I mean, this is, to me, when I read this, my first thought was, this could be a major escalation we're witnessing in our country, not just Highlander, but more. And I think we, as progressives, especially people who are trying to build a new society here, have to be really aware of this and not just take it as if we can kind of sit back and go and relax. I mean, there are direct attacks coming our way.
Well, I think that's true, and I think that our best security is each other, right? I mean, so the question is not so much like, yes, this is happening. Like I said, I live in Mississippi, right? Where during Reconstruction, Mississippi had the most radical, most progressive state constitution in the country, and then once the federally, sort of supported war against the actual state took place, and Reconstruction, and all of the folks who were elected were displaced and many murdered. We had the Mississippi that we've had for so long, of today. Of course, lots of work happening here to change that, and resistance is everywhere. But this is an issue, and so we have to really think about, how do we circle and support each other? How are we aware? How do we engage in solidarity? How do we say not here? Because in some ways, the attack on Highlander brought attention to the issue, but before that, people were being shot and killed in mosques. Before that, people were rolling into Black churches and shooting people. So I think that to say that because it happened to Highlander, now it's an issue, would be ahistorical and wrong, and disconnected from all of our people that we need to be in solidarity with. So we've got to pay attention to all of this. We've got to care for all of our folk, and we've got to look out for each other, and really let these folks know that we're not standing for it.
And Makani, I think that at the end of your piece, you quoted the director, the co-director of Highlander, Ashley Woodard Henderson. Let me just read what she said for our viewers in a quick comment.
And it was Ash and Alan who said it together, both the co-directors.
They both did it. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes.
So this is a time for building our power. Now is a time to be vigilant, to love each other and support each other, and to keep each other safe in turbulent times. Now is not the time to dismiss how scary things are, which makes it even more important to have concrete assessments of concrete conditions and sophisticated strategies to build a new world. That to me is a very powerful, important statement. Build out of power and love.
It is the truth. It is powerful. It is, and that's one of the other reasons why Highlander is so important, because of our leadership too, right? We have people who are committed and courageous and stand even in the face of threats like this. And this is really what we've had to do in this country for the whole time, at least people like me who've been here, right? That to resist and to dream and to work toward a new world is an act of courage. And that really hasn't changed. And maybe there's those of us who have been lulled to sleep by what we don't know about attacks. But I think one of the gifts of living in a place like Mississippi is that you never get to go to sleep, right, about those things.
Right. Well, Makani Themba, thank you so much for your time once again here at The Real News. It's a pleasure to talk with you. And thank you for the
Always.
article. Take care.
Thank you so much. And thank you for The Real News.
Thank you. And I'm Mark Steiner here for The Real News Network. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care.